Życzymy Państwu przyjemnej podróży.
Good afternoon. Now you can hear me. Welcome, dear ladies and gentlemen. Warmly welcome on next debate. We will be talking about a vision of Europe co-shaped by Poland. My name is Joanna Bekker. I'm a deputy manager of Analytic Center Insight. But before we start the debate with our guests, I would like to invite to the stage Minister of European Affairs, Adam Szłapka, to say an introductory word. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation for next Freedom Games. So it's always a challenge to speak in front of the audience, especially in front of such honorable panelists. From my perspective, it's important that one of the panelists, Ignacy Niemczycki, will be in a ministry that deals with European affairs, so we will cooperate more and more. We have a special context this Saturday because yesterday, together with the Prime Minister, we just returned from European Council, quite exceptional one. Of course, a traditional subject, security, Ukraine situation, but also about the migration. This sitting was so important that in fact it led to the change of the paradigm on how we should talk about migration policy. Also in the context of the discussion, it shows how important is leadership in Europe and to give the right tone, the direction. Because we all had an impression already that this discussion in Europe is floating around when it comes to migration, and it's one of the biggest challenges for European Union. And about that we will hear more during the panel. Talking about a vision and the future of European Union, we shall not evade this year's context, most important context, I believe. So the 20th anniversary of expansion in European Union, the accession of Poland. Each of us remember this time when we joined European Union. Each of us had some hopes, expectations, but I think none of us would expect that these 20 years will be such a huge, gigantic success and the enlarging Polish economy. Joining the EU was one of the most important drives for Polish development, except for Polish business and reforms from 90s. So the EU accession was extremely important. We can give some numbers: nominal GDP growth 6 times growth of export, 10 times growth of agricultural products. Those are gigantic successes that show us what we achieved together. However, in this context, it is good to remember how the world looked like in 2004 and how it looks in 2024. that gives a good impression when we think about technological world without social media that fundamentally influence on the democracy shape. There was none about artificial intelligence that will also impact the democracy. But when we think about what world was at that time, that United States was undisputed leader of Western world, that European Union, the participation of EU in world GDP was 25%. Now it's 15%, a significant change, that China was a growing ambition, economical ambition, and we were not sure about the political ambition. That Putin was a president of Russia only for 3 years. Everyone thought he would westernize Russia, he would cooperate. Leonid Kuchma was a president of Ukraine. No one thought about Orange Revolution. It was a completely different world with completely different challenges. And in this context, after 20 years, we have to answer ourselves the question how we want to see the Europe. Today, after these 20 years, we don't have to prove anything to anyone. Like in 2011, we prepared for the presidency. We wanted to show that we can. We tried to be like the best student in the class. Right now, we don't need to prove anything. We are 20 years in European Union. We remember exactly the time before the accession. We are in a big five when it comes to economy matters. In regard of the population, we have all the papers to be a leader in European Union, and how it should look like now. Considering the above mentioned, we need to look on how world is changing, what new threats are present, especially in the context of what expects us in the United States, this uncertainty on the other side of the ocean. That's the best time for us to prove the whole EU with a quake, that's the highest time for Europe to take responsibility for their safety and not only look somewhere behind the ocean, but safety understood in many dimensions. And I will say briefly about that because this will be priorities of our presidency that starts in January. External safety, the borders protection, those are specific examples. Eastern Shield, protection of European sky. It's fighting illegal migration, internal safety, fighting terrorism, sabotage, but also joint protection against natural disasters, cutting off from dangerous suppliers. It's informational safety. Each of us know well how a big threat for generally the democracy is informational threat. We saw how disinformation can increase the populism. So internal security, it's also a subject for us. Also funds, but that's also a new paradigm for economical thinking in EU. It's going away from policy of forbidding and limiting and starting a policy of encouraging people. New approach to competition in European Union. That's also a question of safety. In this context, it's also important to have a food safety and health safety. So in every sector, every segment of life, we are talking about safety, and in every scope of life, we need to think about it in European context. Now, what is the role of Poland in that? First of all, in two extremely important matters when we talk about challenges of in the future of European Union, we have a strong mandate. It's an external safety. We, from the very beginning, we tried to inform European Union about the danger from Russia. Also risks when it comes to populism. We had populism for 8 years, and we understand the threat, and we understand how it can impact the future of Europe. So first of all, taking credit for this safety, financing these challenges related to safety, external safety. I mentioned already 2 initiatives, but it's also a matter of increasing European defense industry. also a matter of fighting populism, which is keeping watch and taking credibility that the policy we are running was socially accepted, and economy is important in this regard. What we should focus on, first of all, it's safety, fighting illegal migration, but also what will decide upon the future of European Union. It's increasing the competitiveness. Those are investments in new technologies and energetic transformation. I think that's where we should focus on, and in this regard, Poland should play a core role, and I think that in the context of recent European Council, it shows that we have a very strong mandate for that. Thank you very much, and I wish. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Now I would like to invite to the stage our guests. I will start from Ms. Marta Poślad. She is an expert on transatlantic issues, but also technological ones. She is a director in Google company. I will sit here, so please be invited. Also, Deputy Minister for Development today, but from Monday, Deputy Minister for European Matters, Ignacy Niemczycki. I invite to the stage Janusz Lewandowski, member of European Parliament, former Commissioner on Budget, and Dr. Jan Olbrycht, member of European Parliament for many years, but also a member of People's Party of Europe, expert on unity policy. And now he shares this knowledge in Batory's Foundation, cohesiveness policy in Team Europe. I wanted, as an introduction, let me just take a comfortable place here. If you need a mic, one is here. Okay, I will come forward a bit. I like to see people whom I'm talking to. But please also prepare questions from the audience. I hope you will have a lot of them. Please excuse me for stretching this introduction a bit, but since you are here in this debate today, I understand that you're interested in European Union and Polish voice in European Union. I would like to recommend you a book that is published only in English, Marek de Vos, Superpower Europe. It's about silent revolution that takes place in EU, and as an introduction, I wanted to read you a short piece. An old union based on cooperation, open borders, and free trade, and free turnover of people, capital, and business should adjust to a new world order that is based on rivalry, conflicts, protectionism, and nationalism. At the same time, relative gravity of Europe decreased in the world, economically, culturally, geographically. More and more often, problems of the world become our problems, since the world becomes more important for us than we, Europe, for the world. Solutions in the world become threats for us more and more often because they are contradictory to our interests and views. How we want to solve this traditional strategical change, what role we want to put on European Union. And author gives these theses. Union becomes a closed geostrategical project, superpower, not postmodernism peace project. It's a project of a state, not a free market project, and that has a fundamental consequences for EU and for member states, for relations between the states. So I would like to invite you to this discussion about what Poland, in what union, especially that conclusion of von der Leyen is that we live in the world where everything becomes a tool of war and everything is questioned. And here I would like to start with a future Deputy Minister of European Affairs to start this discussion from your perspective, how this Poland should look like and how can we answer these theses. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a big pleasure to meet in this honorable group. Some of people here are my former teachers, so it's an honor for me. I will speak as an Undersecretary of State in Technology Development. So my new position will start tomorrow. I would like to answer the quote you mentioned. I think that Europe should not be naive anymore. The time of naiveness finished. Economical naivety is finished, and I think that right now is an interesting moment in EU. And from one side, there is a new period of European Commission when we have serious challenges, economical challenges, and everyone in the EU sees that. Also, the business. We have certain solutions on the table. LEP report or Draghi report. I think it's our starting point. I don't think it can't be business as usual anymore, and our presidency in this economical regard will be about that.
This is not about closing it when it comes to economy. Even right now, the union, even today, is benefiting a lot from export and a lot on the free world trade. I wanted to be on the just basis, though. We know how necessary the reform of WTO is, and it is being blocked by China and USA. We know that certain countries are subsidizing their industry to introduce significant changes in Europe and weaken us this way, and we have to react to it. To us, a symbol. And I'm very happy that Poland has been playing an active part in it. To me, a symbol was the last vote regarding taxes on Chinese cars. Maybe some of you don't know the issue of the duty for Chinese cars. They've been subsidized by country. For 2 years, we've had a tool which allows us to add customs taxation when we see that the subsidies are too high. And there was a giant, difficult debate in Union whether we really want those customs, because some of the industry in Europe is now assessing the prices of their assets in China higher. So if speaking of China, they have to invest here in a safe for us manner. I believe that this is the key. So to begin with, because I understand we still will have an opportunity to speak about it deeper, but I would say it's the end of being naive. Poland right now is in a position to announce the end of being naive and to suggest something new, because at the same time we don't have any doubts that solving most of difficult economic affairs can be done only on the European Union's level. So it's not coming back to nationalism. That's not the path. But opening up treaties, well, today we are going to get stuck in the debate, so we have to quickly begin to operate. So let me begin with saying end of being naive. Before I continue the transatlantic topic and the topic of our input into the debate regarding China, I would like to ask about the vision of competitiveness policy that we can see in the new term. Because Mr. Minister has been participating in the last months in different forms for ministers who are responsible for the topic. So I would like to ask you whether the vision from the Draghi's report As you said during one of the meetings, it's nothing new, but it is a challenge to keep on operating, because for years we've been speaking about competitiveness, but maybe not enough has happened in this regard. The discussion is aiming rather at global competitiveness rather than internal competitiveness, which was an accelerator of European Union functioning for years. I'm wondering whether this vision is consistent with the Polish interests. Where should we pay special attention to certain elements? Because such policy of bigger competitiveness globally can cause bigger competition internally. Some member states can be left behind. So how to shape the discussion, and what is our position on the construction of the champions of the European Union, whether this poses a threat to small and medium enterprises? Thank you. I believe that those are fundamental questions in the context of both our presidency and the next term of the European Commission and the report of Draghi as such. When it comes to Draghi's report, if we read it as a whole, then it's good for the proposals are good for the whole of Europe, and in a consequence, in one or another way, good for all the member states. But what we are experiencing right now is cherry picking. Every member state is selecting what they like, and what they dislike, they forget about it. So let me give you an example. Draghi, in his report, says that we need more expenses of innovation, but with respect to geographic distribution. This is something we could take into account. And some member states reply, Draghi requests more money for innovation, and forget the second part of the sentence, and this has fundamental meaning from our point of view. Please understand me, this is not only because of the fact that we soon are going to fight for money, because we are going to start negotiations of the financial framework for the years to come, but from our point of view, a certain type of social equality strengthens so-called democratic resilience. And this is precisely the experience that Minister Schwabka mentioned, the experience of 8 years of bad rule, where it was not on the right level. So I'm very happy that in this time, plenty of social organizations in Poland have strengthened significantly and provided assistance. But we cannot keep on investing only in the regions which are the most developed, because then we are going to see division of society, and this is going to weaken democratic process in the European Union, and we can forget about competitiveness, because we will be doomed to populism. My perception of Draghi's report is good. I believe that we've needed such a challenge and call for action. I'm happy that Draghi, a serious person in the European arena, he said clearly we have to act. So I believe that in our best interest, it's to have a serious conversation and continue the discussion. We want to do it during the Polish presidency. Draghi is drawing our attention, for instance, to the need for active industrial policy in Europe. This is something we've been avoiding because it was perceived as protectionism. It is not what it is about. We want on the global scale to have a level playing field, so even equal conditions of competitiveness. He drew our attention to the fact that industrial and trade policies should be aligned, and it's something that's not happening right now. I'm going to tell you a side note. Usually I'm a member of Competitiveness Council, and overall, during the meeting, we are discussing how we want to react. Once I was replacing Minister Tomczak on the Council for Trade, and the discussion there was completely different. It turned out that China, to some countries, are not a problem, and we need to cooperate. It may not be like that. We have to align those two policies. So this is yet another thing that Draghi draws our attention to. He also says pretty clearly, and it relates partially to what you said about champion, he's clearly saying that public assistance is not a solution. During the pandemic, the rules of giving assistance on the national level were turning more and more loose, and this brings economic results. The first member states that provided most public assistance was Germany. There is a justification to it because they've needed to quickly phase out from Russian gas. But further focus on social assistance is going to weaken our internal market, which used to be a driver of growth. I believe we have a different policy than Draghi when it comes to building European champions. Draghi is calling for leading to a bigger consolidation in certain sectors. We see the need for scale when it comes to financing, but we also see that there are really fantastic companies, for instance, in space industry, which are super innovative, and they are doing it 10 times cheaper than the champions. So it is simply not the right way. But again, the Draghi's report overall is perceived in a positive light, and we'll seriously be discussing it during the Polish presidency. I would like to stick to the topic of trade, which you've mentioned, and transatlantic relationships. And I would like to ask you, Marta, about your point of view, because the insecurity when it comes to the future American policy, it's not only about a change, Republicans rather than Democrats in the White House, a matter of trade and the future and relationships with the USA. It's a question, and the implications of the elections can indeed be dominant in the next months. We are coming back from Sopot, from the European Forum of New Ideas, where Prime Minister Tusk mentioned about turning back to the friendly relationships with USA, Great Britain, and Canada. From your point of view, of a person who is very active in the American Chamber of Trade, how do you see the future relationships and impact on the shape of the European Union? Thank you very much for your question and for inviting me to the conversation, which is so broad, and I believe that we could invest a whole conference to the implications of Draghi's reform. I believe you are right that no matter who wins, we are going to experience a change. I see that we are speaking a lot about consequences in Poland, even though we are not electing a USA president, but still many of us will be choosing a form of answering, whether it will be done on the governmental side or on the business side. Draghi, in his report, approaches the topic of the Soyuz in a very cautious way because of the insecurity. But in many parts, there is this thought that there are sectors and processes which cannot be on the right track unless we come up with alliances. So that brings me to a topic of our panel, which is what is the vision of Europe that is co-shaped by Poland. And I believe that amongst my top 3 topics, where Poland, in my opinion, has plenty to give when it comes to entrepreneurship, boldness, and ambition, when it comes to developing competitiveness, innovative businesses, also because of the fact that we don't have so-called industrial legacy. So we are bolder. It's easier for us to think about the future rather than looking into the back and wondering how to save certain sectors. Also, empathy and assertiveness in providing assistance to Ukraine that is shaping context from competitiveness too. Also in the context of defense, this is an issue which is developing in a very interesting manner now. In our partnership with Ukraine, we've learned in the last 2.5 years to build resilience, but also to be innovative in the military sector. And last but not least, third thing that I believe we should bring to the table is to know how to make an alliance. Poland is probably right now one of the best places for American investors of strategic political interest allocation. And it shows once again that no matter who is ruling, we are able to build such partnership. So I believe that this is a big value for the next couple of months. Because we know how to do it, we know why it's important, and we know. And I think that Poland is going to be determined in a very special way for European-American integration. So, as Mr. Minister said, we've gained the ability to speak of strategic interests and detecting them. I think that coming back to the beginning of my intervention, we have a series of we have a well-known list of unknown answers that are to be clarified. So we could here draw plenty of graphs, and the possibility of Trump winning elections could mean a lot, depending on who would be the Secretary of State and who would be his trade representative, and so on and so forth. But in my opinion, when it comes to values,
When it comes to some directions, I really think that Poland has an extremely significant role to play. Maybe we will not give our voice in this election, but I'm interested in what will be the role of these relations, no matter who will be a resident of a White House. This is my strong belief that this inter-Atlantic alliance will be important not only because of existential things of safety for us, but also from regard of everyday life. My work in Google, nowadays when European Union, Europe is talking about competitiveness as Silicon Valley, works in an completely different field, looking closely on how artificial intelligence will change our world, what chances it will bring, and how to manage the threats. I believe that without partnership between Europe and US, Europe will not be able to anymore chase other players. And I think that this is a race where this consolidation should take place. In other words, using the resources that AI gives in US, Europe has great competences and possibilities to apply, to solve problems, to build applications, own apps, because this was also always a strong part of Europe, creative sector and capacity to create sophisticated solutions. So I think it will be an interesting subject for next couple of years, and I would wish ourselves that EU would have this courage. The end of naivety should be another threshold, another start. Thank you. You mentioned about the importance of our presence in EU, about building the allies, building alliance. With previous weak leadership, France and Germany, there was a hope for Weimar Triangle to become a certain restoration. I'm not sure if these expectations were met, but Poland started to build alliances that now has abbreviation in Brussels and BIP. Mr. Minister can correct me if I'm wrong. We started to meet with Baltic states, Norway and Ireland to look for common ground. Why I'm mentioning that? Because I want to go to a big subject. What we said before, it's European budget. Because in the end of Polish presidency, ladies and gentlemen, European Commission will present a budget plan. And I really liked how one politician from ruling camp said that all devils will be in one place. So this discussion will not be exclusively about money, but about a vision of Europe, and there's a lot of changes in there. So I would suggest us to start from MEP Janusz Lewandowski, Commissioner for the Budget. What is your view? What kind of negotiations are ahead? What they will mean? What direction it can take? And what should be Polish voice in this regard? I would gladly leave the cohesion policy for Mr. Olbrycht. Good afternoon. Every year, Freedom Games bring me to Lodz about this budget. It's not so exciting subject, but I would like to refer to the title of our panel, Vision of Europe, co-shaped by Poland. The strategy that is now not only Donald Tusk's strategy, but it's a governmental strategy. It's not a strategy of quick implementation of asylum and migration regulation, but it's a serious modification on vulnerable asylum matters, considering the sponsoring of people trafficking on eastern border. Another part of our panel is co-shaping. Again, we are playing on Supreme League after many years of this pride that didn't give anything, in fact, no influence, no money, that ended as an attempt on Donald Tusk with a person from Lodz, by the way. But forgetting all that, we are now in a Supreme League again, and we again have a decisive voice. I often see an attempt to see a final vision of European Union. It's a proof of human's nature, the pride of human nature, which is we should look at Szymon Manet's concept that said about gradual creation of common interests between member states. And that's how we should act. And federal Europe vision is most harmful. Right away is considered to be a superstate and ruled by Germany. So Law and Justice Party see only some problems in that. So some vulnerable questions might require not this unanimous approach. But before we are going to the budget matter, I just wanted to say about another thing. For 20 years, I was sure that I am a part of pacifistic project Europe. Now, because of Putin, we go through enhanced course about military art. And that changed, and the resilience, strategic sovereignty, regardless what happens on the US, it's something that changed. So the most expected gift that politicians can offer in a situation when fears returned to our continent because war returned budget and competitiveness. One is related to another because there is an attempt to build these future budgets to create competitiveness, competitive Europe. Until this time, we failed in that. Our old continent is considered to be digital colony of Google, GAFA and Facebook. And indeed, we have a problem that some not honest competition was joined by China. They are capable of manufacture everything. They know how to export boomerangs to Australia with a good price, but also jumbo jets and ballistic rockets. And they steal intellectual rights, they steal patents. So the budget that is leaking, as far as we know from the leaks, from the highest level of Barley Mall, Draghi that wants to find 800 billions of euro to complete his project, but I'm not sure where he wants to find it, because in public sector he heard quick 9 from Berlin. When it comes to private entities in Europe, we will never manage to have a capital union that can transposition London City to European continent, because it's a different mentality, different culture. Our real economy will be ruled by banking system. So we have a very contradictory signals, because from one side, Ms. Commissioner Ferrero started high-level group. I think colleague Janek will talk about it. And this high-level group gives us a simple conclusion. Cohesion is a DNA of Europe, is a visibility of Europe everywhere, from Cyprus to Ireland, from Portugal to Estonia. And these signals that we see from national plans, they lose most important values of cohesion. So visibility, regionalism, local organizations pose a threat of local authorities. And another very precious value, and annual reviews. Indeed, an interesting situation happened. I draw a plan already of European budget for 2014-2020. Polish presidency came in. It was in July 2011. Right now, Polish presidency will end when Serafin, fighting these leaks that come from another level, and it has this mission, will shape many years frameworks for years 2028, 2034, when Polish presidency finishes. So this presidency covers with many years frames. It was a gift for Portugal, Greece, Spain, these many years frameworks that gave some anticipation for finances. So we entered that with as a main beneficiary. Right now a smaller one, I believe right now 150 billion euros now we managed to obtain, and with 2 years delay we use a national recovery plan. I will also ask about a matter before coming to the cohesion policy, because as you've said, it's related to the subject of our discussion, but another important matter when it comes to finances. And the same question I will ask, I asked this question to another interlocutor before, but I will not spoil it. Now, where do we get the funds for all these ambitious policies? There will be a huge discussion about a debt, and they think that European budget should be 2%. I think what should be the position of Poland when it comes to debt, increasing the budget? Where should we get the money from? This will be a problem of Commissioner Serafin, who will be roasted soon in Brussels. I will be glad to do that. He was a deputy chief of a department. Indeed, Serafin not only has this mission that draws completely non-regional strategy of building European budgets, but since 2028, paying off this huge COVID loan will start. And this is not any fun and games, because those are tremendous interest rates that we already pay off, and it's difficult to build annual budgets for us, considering unpredictable interest rate. At the same time, we try to help Ukraine. So there's Ukraine facility, 50 billions, and at the same time, what will be concluded this week is another plan of a loan for 50 billion euros, but is constructed in a way not to burden Ukrainian budget. So it should come from frozen Russian assets. We will see how it goes. If it's successful, it's okay. But to pay off this tremendous debt from 2028 capital interest rates, we would have to reach for new resources, own resources.
As of 2021, nothing has happened in the matter. To us, what's the worst is that expansion of TS, meaning sea transportation, and this can raise the costs of also other sectors, but the least efficient from the sources, because plastic is also phasing out. The non-recycled plastics are fading out when it comes to the income of the European budget. Maybe my project that collapsed pretty quickly will come back. I mean, taxes from financial transactions, because I think it wouldn't be harmful to Polish interests. ETS, a very efficient source, the least comfortable for Poland because of the fact that we have vast delays. We are going to make Europe greener, but not very quickly during the presidency, because we have to face the costs of our patriotic approach to coal in the past. When I've been listening to Piotr Serafin at the Commission for European Affairs, when he has, during a hearing when he was supposed to become a European, Polish ambassador at the European, in Brussels, so he spoke about cohesion policy, but the leakages that Lewandowski mentioned, we know that the chief of the European Commission perceives it differently. The model of future cohesion policy, he sees it in a more centralized way, which is like next generation EU model does. So the in the National Reconstruction Plan. So Piotr Serafin in his letter wrote it pretty quickly, clearly, what are his expectations and what are the expectations of the President Ursula von der Leyen. So to me, it's very important to us and to the model of development of Europe. How is it going to be when it comes to the position of Poland? How should it be? Can you tell us from your experience of years of working on regional policy? Yes, first of all, I wanted to tell you that there are ties in between competitiveness, economy, and cohesion policy. It's not something that is aside. And this is also why changes which will be ongoing in this whole economic zone will be also influencing cohesion policy. Cohesion policy in every single forecast, and I've seen plenty, was fighting for survival. Why? Well, because that there were always tendencies to define that this policy is coming to finalité. This is important. Please imagine a situation where you would conduct such an experiment to think that European cohesion policy is a matter of equalizing the developmental disproportions. At one point, this has been expanded to the investment policy too. But let's imagine that we stick to the traditional one. Then what disproportions are we talking about? I'm not speaking about indicators, whether it's GDP or what, but are we speaking about every single disproportion or disproportion compared to a certain referral level? Let's call it an X. Under this level, the disproportions are not of our interest because they've reached the level where you don't have to even out the disproportions, unless you want to even out every single disproportion. If some will be very rich and some others less rich, then we will be evening out the differences between less and more rich people. This is the key issue related to deciding on a policy. So please bear in mind that part of the countries, mostly Scandinavian countries, in a not direct way, they showed that this policy at a certain stage was crucial because we needed to give a boost to certain member states, but from a certain moment it's no longer needed. There are other policies needed, economy, transportation, innovation, etc., and no equalizing disproportions. So a very famous saying that they've heard from Scandinavian countries: go to Poland, see how it looks like, whether they still need money. Do they still need money in a sense of achieving a level that was imagined? So this is a question which returns, and it returns yet one more time during a discussion that I took part in before elections, when representatives of so-called frugals were decisively saying that it's highest time to put an end to cohesion policy, not limited. Simply, that's the end. It's enough. We don't do it anymore. Let's go towards other politics, and some were very happy about it. Janusz spoke about Ferreira, a commissioner who is so weak that she is unable to defend anything in cohesion policy. So this has been touched upon, and there is a will of reducing the contributions. But what happened within the last 5 years is that the cohesion policy has been treated as a reservoir for completely different activities. It was done in a matter of a goodwill. So you have very limited money for cohesion, but if you transfer it to another goal, you can do it without any limitations. You can do it with the permission of all the member states of the European Commission. You don't have to, but you may. InvestEU is a classical case of a guarantee related to economic affairs. So if you want to, you can allocate the cohesion money for the goal without any special limitations, etc., etc. Those who fled Ukraine are asking about money, and they are saying you can take money from cohesion. If you take money from cohesion, then you don't have to add more. The last example is flood. Yes, you can get 5 billion, but this is money from cohesion. If you take the money away from cohesion, it will be simpler, easier, faster. If you don't have your own input, then you are gaining. So for a couple of years, we've been witnesses of such a situation that everyone, when praising cohesion policy, were disarming it, claiming that, after all, it's not that necessary anymore. It's important, but not crucial. Of course, the question is, how do we understand it? The situation has changed to such an extent that the problem of Ukraine came up. And when there is a problem of Ukraine, Moldova, and Western Balkans. So what's then when they enter, whether the policy that is highly developed, and now some arrive that are much lower. Doesn't mean that the cohesion policy is going to be moved towards Ukraine. I'm going to risk answering that yes, if at some point Ukraine is going to enter the EU after the accession, then the cohesion policy will be completely different. It will be a different world. Those will be different calculations. It will be completely changed. More to that, in the European diplomacy, we started preparing Union for accession. When we are speaking about a budget that will be a preparation for accession, this is speaking about agricultural policy. The European Union has to prepare for accession, otherwise there will be no consent for further member states' accession. This is pretty simple. So we are witnesses of an entirely new situation. Another thing that emerged and changed the way of thinking of European politicians, not only Commission but also prime ministers. Mr. Lewandowski spoke about debt, and debt is there. We will need to pay for it. It's around 30 billion yearly without income, as you said. So either we will have to raise contributions or decrease politics. And the first candidate will be to diminish cohesion policy. But the whole debt is based on a different policy. And I believe that this is related to this way of thinking. Why have we been thinking about using this debt? Because member states such as Germany and France changed radically the approach to the debt of EU because they've learned that it can be a perfect tool for impact. So we will take a loan, we'll give you the money, for instance, via National Reconstruction Plan, but under certain conditions. You have to meet the conditions. It's something they try to do with the conditionality. And now it's broader. So you will create structural reforms and you get money. You don't, you will not get money. The whole National Reconstruction Plan is based on that. No one in Poland has been discussing in the last 3 years about the fact that Poland suggested 50 structural reforms. 50 reforms that have to be performed by mid-2026, and that is supposed to be followed by investments. So I'm heading to telling you that this way of thinking will be transposed to cohesion. So if you've been listening to Ursula von der Leyen lately, cohesion policy, yes, but we will make one huge fund for a member state, including agriculture, etc. It's not that important because a matter related to organization. And the second issue is that this whole package will be free of reforms. If you show us structural reforms, you will get money for cohesion, for agriculture. If you don't do reforms, then you will not get money. This is a simplification of the structure. This is being followed by centralization in Brussels, in member states, because the Commission clearly shows that they are moving their responsibility towards government of the member state, that they are supposed to take care of regional projects rather than Brussels. Von der Leyen is going to explain that that's not what she meant, but this is the basic question, whether, after all, the goal of the European Union is to decentralize management. Is it the goal of the European Union or not? Is it only about efficiency? Because cohesion policy is about shared management. It's about shared management, co-responsibility, co-programming, co-controlling, co-monitoring. And the National Reconstruction Plan is not based on that. It's a purely banking way of thinking. You have an idea, you execute it, cash. So the cohesion policy is not only a matter of asking whether it will survive, but how will it be organized and whether the aim of it would be to strengthen NGOs, regional, etc. Will it be a way of transferring money to governments so that they would do something? Also, please remember that everything that is being prepared for accession of new member states, and they might be the subject of new cohesion policy, and the rest not necessarily. We have a very difficult task today because we should be heading deeper into many topics that were touched upon. And soon, as I promised, I will give the floor to the audience, so please prepare your questions. But about the vision of Europe, I want to ask a question to Mr. Olbrycht. When we are speaking about the vision of Europe, speaking about your political experience in the group of the European People's Party. Before the European elections, we heard about the growth of populism. Mr. Minister said that we have a special mandate in Poland to take the floor in this regard and to operate. Some are thinking that if Trump wins, it would strengthen the right in Europe. Then the right wing would be even louder and more vocal. Some say that the growing right wing in Europe is already causing mainstream parties to be more conservative in different policies. So here I want to pose a question. What's the vision related to politics?
I just wanted to refer to what you said. Being a part of delegation in European Parliament in Washington, we had meetings with Republican think tanks, and we asked how they imagine Trump's victory. It is something new that a couple of serious institutions work for Trump preparing his campaign, which was not there in previous version. Now it's a couple thousand people working for Trump's administration. So asking about what it will influence Europe, they will expect that main partner for Trump from Europe will be Meloni. That it would be main channel that Trump can use. That's quite characteristic thinking. But when it comes to European People's Party inside, what I could see inside our group, there is a shift in a way of thinking. Well, the policy is about winning the election. That's what it is. In the end, either you win elections or you lose it. So, of course, the policy should be made with people. There can't be policy against people or outside people. So it was a very radical example as a protest of farmers in Brussels. It was so radical that the way of thinking about agriculture and environment changed. European People's Party has it the same way. If you listen to politicians who would a couple of years back say it's a terrible populism and so on, now they say populism is in fact a way of expressing the idea by part of the society which might not be best educated. Perhaps they are in hands of people who give simple answers for complicated questions, but let's put them aside. Let's focus on people, those who ask. We cannot not see them. We need to see those people who have certain concerns. They are afraid of certain situations. They have expectations and so on. And if you listen to politicians from EPP, their rhetorics changed. We need to understand this and that. We need to answer the people, which turns a bit to the populism way. But this is as a commentary. EPP was always a central party. Right now, central parties are in a very difficult situation. Central parties, and it's proved by many theoreticians, they have a choice either to move to the left, and they would never be as left as the left wing is, so they are pseudo left wing, or they try to go right. But if they go too far right, they are again not a real right, unless they become a right-wing party. So right now, analysts say that central parties need to build their central capacity. That's an answer for your question, not to see and recognize these threats of populism, but also to find ways to go through the center. And that's how I see our presidency. It will be a way to show that not this nor that way, but as an attempt to get something from one and in the other sides, to have people on your side, because there can be no policy without people. Ladies and gentlemen, are there any questions from the audience? I see someone. Please introduce yourself before asking the question. Good afternoon, Iga Komonska, Robert Szymon's Foundation. We heard about many issues. It's difficult to ask one question, but I wanted to relate to what was said by Mr. Minister and other panelists about a role, and in the context of cohesion policy and Polish presidency and budget planning, how to think about this citizens' resilience, social resilience on these challenges, threats drawn by Mr. Minister, but also challenges related to civic society. How can we reinforce these positions? What are your thoughts? What voice are dominating in your camps? Thank you for this important question. And who of you would like to give an answer as a first? If I might add something before, well, in EPL, the moods about civic society as a part that is not in public powers, well, the moods are bad. The moods are bad because it's not like in a classical story of politician. I am a politician, so we can say about public affairs, unlike NGOs. Right now, the NGOs are a transmission way of many different actions. So I need to say that on the side of civic society, there should be an awareness that you need to put aside certain things, clear yourself. Certain lobbyings in European environment were done by environments, non-governmental organizations worked on one or another things. The impact is what matters. So the approach to NGOs, it has to be with a huge reserve, but at the same time we know that it's completely crucial. It's necessary. Without civic societies, nothing can be done, because that's the matter of resilience, social resilience, and that's why we need also a cohesion policy. Not only, but also. For me, a classic example is what happened with conference Future of Europe. That's a lost chance for me. It's a lost chance because, in fact, we did something that Macron wanted. So repeating these meetings where representatives of citizens took place, and what then? No actual results of that, in my opinion. But Parliament also voted on these traktat changes, and there will be pressure on Polish presidency to go on with convent. But Polish presidency will not fall for that. That's what I mentioned. Mr. Ministers say that the owner of traktat change are states. Yeah, but that's how it looks. Also, these building bridges in civic society in between policies and civic society. It is important, but we need to cut off from certain things. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No questions? Oh, also the answer of Mr. Minister. Well, I was here called by Mr. Commissioner. I'm always in ahead of that Minister of Development of Technology, but before I used in NGOs. Maybe my perspective is quite peculiar for that reason. But I think that I partially answered this question in my introduction, saying that if we look at the role of cohesion policy, if we look at suggestions from Draghi's report about proper geographical distribution of money, also European funds, for us, not only purely economical aspect is important that we receive some money, but also an aspect of strengthening this democratical resilience. And who is building this capacity? In a big extent, civic societies, organizations, NGOs. So from perspective of our safety, which is a highest priority for the presidency, I think there is a big role of civic society, but also purely in economical turnover, I see a role of organizations there, NGOs there. Also in economical turnover, we have more and more disinformation. There is lack of awareness about products. Some services are so complicated that not all the matters are comprehensive, like data protection, and that's where the role of NGOs comes in. I understand what MEP said about a Qatar affair. It was an unfortunate situation when the form of non-governmental organization was used, hijacked, to do something. And we need to be careful, watchful for that. But not being in EPP, I can say that I didn't like this behavior and statement of EPP because it looked like they want to close the discussion with NGOs, that they used this affair in a way. And I know it wasn't an intention of MEP, but that's how it happened. I agree with you that it was used to cut off a bit, which was a mistake. Great, thank you. I'm glad we agree, Mr. Lewandowski. And the last question I wanted to ask Marta, if you please allow me. Of course, we will give you a chance also to you. So I think that the nearest years will be a time of different understanding of resilience. There's, of course, democratic resilience, but I think a huge challenge will be the resilience of Europe as a whole for external shocks, which will happen in this unpredictable world. These shocks will appear. Until now, EU goes out as a wins in this crisis, the crisis that happened. We are basing on banking system, non-capital markets. COVID came from China, but at the time we were the most affected continent because of our open lifestyle, and many people suffered this disease. Migration crisis is unfortunately the proximity of a continent around us. We are a continent for migration for many, many years. We have a museum of migration in Gdynia, and we became a continent of big migration. And I'm joking that Liberty statue should have actually be transferred to Europe, because famine and other problems in Africa will make us a destination for migration for different places. And also Putin prepared for us another military crisis. That's why we learn in accelerated way what's the difference between howitzer and self-propelled artillery, towed artillery. Is it the same? All the abbreviations of the programs, very militarized programs of EU, that until 2022, in fact, EU was a fully pacifistic program under the protection of US. The perspective of another years also need to consider the military aspect. So in the end, these two revolutions, we didn't pay too much attention to energy matters, but I think we will have more debates on that. But energetic and technological revolutions that are in front of Europe, undoubtedly, they are related to each other, and they are related to big costs, expenses. So from one side, it's this economical perspective of view on technology, but geopolitical as well, because it is said that technology, just like trade and investment, becomes a tool of geopolitics. So I wanted to ask you, Marta, what is it in this new technological momentum, also mentioned by Ursula von der Leyen, what you expect, what would be good for Europe and for Poland? First of all, never the need for energy transformation was so strong as what happens now in technology, because the needs of artificial intelligence development require extraordinary amounts of energy. I personally believe that it's good that there is this convergence. One change will support another. Many technological companies announced investments last week, investments related to energy production, nuclear energy production, which I believe will help many societies. It's an interesting investment direction and something that European Union should look closely to, especially Poland, given that we have this benefit that huge technological players are already here, and never technology was so tightly related to geopolitics. And I think that what happens, these geopolitical movements are reflected one-to-one in the technology nowadays. I think I a bit answered this question. We are in a moment when we can look at this technological race where three players are taking part, EU, US and China, and if we start cheating a bit and these two players combine their strengths, of course, there are many nuances to that. I know we have 1 minute, but undoubtedly to what happens in EU, because I believe that transatlantic relations are much more complicated than just political. It has many layers of these relations, cultural, but also the trade cooperation, economical cooperation, also American policy, external policy is much more diverse than this inside policy. So I believe that no matter how the election in US will finish, we will try to combine our strength in common development of artificial intelligence. I think it's the only chance to fully use its potential for good sake, not for bad, and that it can solve civilization problems. And I think Europe, again, has a part to play in this regard with values or famous European reservedness traditions. I think it will allow us to somehow fulfill this tradition, technological advancement promise. Thank you very much. I will just share with you that I'm really glad that Polish presidency comes in. It's a time to solve something for Poland, but not just that. It's not the sole role of the presidency. But I think that all us here, we should ask for a smart discussion about Europe in Poland. We need to see Europe in a different, smarter way, and we should present Poland in Europe in a new way. So I'm really glad that we could discuss about that today. I invite you for many other discussions related to Europe here in Freedom Games. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl. Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarzy telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 000 osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise